just want to start by saying that I think my most important credential is I am a lifelong anxiety sufferer. So I have been working my whole life to better understand how the brain mind works and how to work with it. So let's see if I can progress here with my slides. So what I'm going to talk about is how the reward circuitry of the brain. And next week, when you talk with somebody about addiction, you're going to be talking about reward circuitry that didn't work so well. So I'm going to talk about anhedonia, the inability to experience satisfying pleasures. I'm going to talk about how that's a symptom of and a contributor to stress-related illnesses, depression, anxiety, addictions, and many other challenges to well-being. I'm going to talk about the 3-level mind and explain how it works so we can work it better. I'll introduce the 7 core embodied emotional instincts that live in the oldest parts of our brain, evolutionary. And I'll give a very brief overview of how to balance the core emotions. So I'm going to ask you guys a favor. Please help me stay on track in terms of time. I understand that I'm supposed to speak for 30 minutes. Is that correct? And you know the old adage, it takes a longer time to make a shorter talk. And the past couple months, both my parents died and I've had 2 new grandchildren. So I've been living full catastrophe, fabulousness. And I'm very, very happy to be with you. I'm up in Boston, actually. So just also to let you know, if you have any questions, feel free. Also, you can book a free consultation with my website. So moving on, I'm going to talk about the pleasure crisis, the explosion of anhedonia, and why pleasure is imperative to healthy living. So this is part of a bigger crisis. If you've noticed, there's an increase in the diagnosis of depression, and actually anxiety is running rampant now. So we are a culture increasingly of stressed out people. There's a big bump up in the use of prescribed painkillers, antidepressants, and opioid addictions. This is nothing I think you guys haven't heard. Heroin, illicit pleasure-seeking drug use has doubled between 2007 and 2012. Overdose now is the leading cause of death among Americans below the age of 50. Suicide is a huge problem now. We are a lewd, prude nation, pleasure obsessed, yet pleasure negative. And there's a whole bunch of studies that modern day Americans continue to be influenced by traditional Puritan Protestant morality, implicit moralism, racism, present day hangups about work and sex. And I think it's dividing our nation in a way that's very, very sad. The mental health of young people is declining. Gen Z, significantly more likely to report mental health as only fair or poor. That 27% of the people of that age group are saying their mental health is only fair to poor. Is it a coincidence that these people are digital natives? I write a lot about in my book how we're using attention with our devices is hijacking these core emotional systems. I'll unpack that a bit more. Millennials are doing a little bit better. 15% of them rate their mental health as fair to poor. Gen Xers, 13%. And for the baby boomers, we actually are doing better. 7% of boomers and 5% of older adults report mental health as just fair or poor. One thing we know is that young people are having less sex than previous generations, and in fact are having trouble having relationships, and adults are experiencing a sexual recession that is now kind of going into a depression. So I'm going to talk now a little bit between the relationship between stress, anxiety, and anhedonia. I'm going to try and get rid of this thing here that is in my way. Okay, great. I had, okay. So in response to stress, the brain releases chemicals, neurotransmitters such as dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, glutamate, and GABA to alter the biochemistry for us to optimize our stress response. Ongoing stress, which is what has happened, there's steady high cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone secreted by the adrenal glands, which further interfere with our capacity to relax, experience pleasure, and to learn effectively. And when people are stressed out, what they do is they complain of a lot of brain fog and difficulty getting information and learning. And I see that a lot with my college students. So when the stress response becomes maladaptive, we have an increase in anxiety, depression, energy depletion, sleep disruption, and vulnerability to illnesses, both physical and mental, including addiction. It also hastens the process of aging. And some people are particularly vulnerable to these maladaptive stress responses, including those genetically prone to addiction. They're born with issues, reward circuitry issues, which can be made worse by childhood stress. So we're really talking about there's a lot of things that go on that contribute to, if you have a genetic predisposition plus early childhood trauma. That's what my next book is about, how to have a happy childhood as an adult. So we really need to take this seriously. Pleasure is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the key to a balanced brain, body life. Nature wired in the capacity for pleasure as a signal of what feels good and hopefully is good for us. Where that has happened, that's gotten hijacked. We'll talk a little bit more about that. There are many benefits of being sexually active. There are also many benefits of having pleasure in your life out of the bedroom. Sex holds, as I say, a big potential for healthy hedonism. I'm not someone who says that you have to have sex to have a happy life. But when people want to enhance their capacity for sexual pleasure, there are lots of ways that we can work with that. And again, we always need to define what's meant by sex. That's a way longer conversation, which we won't get into today. So what I'm going to do now is move into the layman's introduction to the 3 levels of the brain mind. So what I'm going to introduce today are these core emotions that we share with all mammals and many other animals that have just recently, in the past 2 decades, been mapped out, but have not been sufficiently integrated into psychology and medicine, which I'm trying to do something about. So those core emotions, if you notice, influence everything, including secondary processes such as learning and habit, all the way up to our tertiary processes, which is what we think of as when we think of our minds, our thoughts, our awareness. It's actually a very small window. Very little of the mind goes on consciously. A lot of it is underneath the hood. So I want you to introduce you to Panksepp, who is my mentor, who's unfortunately no longer with us, but he is the guy who coined the term affective neuroscience, and he is the wonderful man that mapped out these circuits. So he talks about 3 levels of emotional experience that basically reflect the 3 stages of our evolutionary development. So the first stage, which is the basement of the brain, the oldest part of the brain, is what we call primary process. Psychological experiences that are instincts, emotional responses that are generated by these built-in core affects or emotions, built in by evolution. My 4-day-old granddaughter has them already online, and you can see it. These are instincts that are built in. These are largely subcortical, which just means that they're not involving the cortex, the more complicated mind. these core emotional experiences are experienced very vividly in man and animal. So animals show fear, rage, attachment, and other emotional responses without having the benefit of that fancy neocortex, the top of our brains, which permits our higher level reflections on feelings. So the animals have these core emotions, but they're not able to reflect like we can, we who have those higher level awarenesses. So even babies born without a cortex, a developed cortex, will exhibit these core emotions that I'm going to unpack in a bit. So what we need to know about these primary core emotions, they deal with our sensory triggers, things that feel pleasurable, things that feel painful. So something perceived as pleasant and pleasurable, the mind, brain, body determines that it's safe for good or good for us, and we want to approach them. That's if things are working well. Something deemed unpleasant, likewise, we tend to automatically avoid. So you see that the reward circuitry it's really not about reward per se, but it's about learning, moving us to learning, moving us away from things. So this core emotional circuitry is also wired for us to respond to basic physical needs, food, water, air, safety, all of that stuff. The higher brain does not have time to think through the satisfaction of those needs. So it has to happen automatically. I'm not going to unpack all of the more detailed stuff about how the brain processes the automatic versus the intentional stuff. That's a little bit much for today. But just know that there are different routes that come into the brain. Some are very fast track, and some let us have more slow consideration. So having the raw feelings as the functions of the mind's basement requires no prior learning. Animals do not need to be taught to feel pain or feel pleasure. My 4-day-old granddaughter does not need to be taught that breast milk tastes yummy. These are pleasurable affects that are built in. So Panksepp said pleasure and pain facilitate survival. I have taken this to the next step with the work. I say pleasure facilitates thrival. So now we're going to unpack the next level of the brain mind, what I call the mid-level brain mind, and that's the learning brain. So that's built upon the foundation of those core wired in emotions. And these are the processes of learning and memory. So these are largely upper limbic. Limbic means the emotional circuits. So the learning is influenced very much by our emotions, and it's in between the emotional brain and the higher brain. So in contrast to the core emotions, which are always experienced, you can't help but feel those states, even if you don't want to. The secondary learning processes occur largely non-consciously. So a lot of when we respond to things, we may not be aware of what that conditioning or that learning is that's influencing us in the moment. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the secondary mid-level mind is the territory of behavioral and emotional habits. They're stubbornly affixed because they're the automatic, under the hood source that goes underneath our conscious awareness. And when we talk about addiction, it really is learning gone bad. It's not a disease per se, but it's learning that goes bad. So we need to register that our survival is predicated on learning that becomes automatic. The mind is a habit-making machine. Otherwise, if we had to consciously reflect on every little thing, we wouldn't even get out of the house in the morning. So the mind, for example, when you start driving, it takes a lot of conscious attention, and it's not automatic after it becomes well learned. Sometimes if you're driving and you try and get too conscious about your driving, it can actually get in the way. So this is understanding the mind as a habit-making machine. And so this habit-making stuff is in contrast with effortful learning. So learning that requires a lot of conscious attention would be, for example, when you're first learning how to drive, when you're trying to solve a complicated math equation, or you're negotiating a challenging business deal. That requires a lot of the neocortex, the thinking and planning and the consciousness. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. So this level 2 mid-level mind is the territory of what we call classical conditioning. So there's a case in psychology, the case of HM, a man who, because of his epilepsy, they basically removed a lot of his temporal lobe, which meant that he could not form new memories consciously. But if you shook his hand with a painful buzzer one day and you went to put your hand out, he wouldn't remember ever seeing you, but he wouldn't shake his hand. So that's called implicit learning. So implicit learning is the stuff that's happening as a result of the mind being able to learn things below the conscious mind. So now let's move our way up to the top of the food chain, the neocortex, that layer of fabulousness that covers human beings' brains. We call those tertiary processes. And that distinguishes us to some extent from other non-human animals. For example, primates do have cortices, but they're not as well developed as ours. So humans and animals are very similar at the bottom of the brain and very different at the top of the brain. So this top level cortex is involved in our cognitive functioning, our thoughts and planning, allows us to reflect on our experience. When people have damage to that area, particularly the prefrontal cortex, they have a lot of deficits in being able to do those higher level functions. So the tertiary processes of the neocortex allow us to actually have awareness and reflect on our emotions rather than just simply experience it. My dog, who you can't see here, she has a lot of emotions, but she's probably not reflecting on them, saying, oh, I'm really upset that my mother left me yesterday, or I really feel jealous of this newborn that my mother is paying attention to. But they do have all of those same core systems that we do. So using the frontal regions effectively allows us to choose our paths and intentions in conjunction with the working memory, which is a facet of that functioning. That's our conscious window on the world. And actually, that's just a tip of the iceberg. So I like to say that that allows us to regulate our behaviors as long as the basement of the brain, the core emotions, and the learning aspects of the brain are in alignment. Otherwise, we can be very easily hijacked by our strong emotions. And what is addiction? Hijacking. It hijacks whatever people, I just spoke about sex addiction yesterday. It's actually when the using of those behaviors become a way of people coping with negative emotion, and it hijacks their ability to make good decisions. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit why cognitive behavioral therapy is not enough. So these are top-down techniques that rely on us thinking about our beliefs and reflecting on, our thoughts. Sometimes that can't alone we all know what we should do, right? We should drink less alcohol. We should exercise. We should be less angry. We know what to do, but we can't always harness our attention, our emotions to change self-defeating patterns and behaviors. So the top-down techniques are not often effective at harnessing attention, and attention is everything, and behaviors sufficiently for us to implement change. What we don't know is what we don't know. So we don't know how the basement of our brains with our out of balance emotional systems are infusing what we're remembering, what we're paying attention to, what we're focusing on. We always know what's on our mind, but we don't always know which mind is dominant. And when I say the dominant mind, we're going to talk about the core emotions as kinds of mind. So when you get triggered in fear, the world looks scary. When you get triggered into rage, you're looking at angry stuff. So I am very proud of this, along with my 5th grandchild being born this week. My newest paper has come out, Affective Neuroscience, Applications for Sexual Medicine Research and Clinical Practice. This is where I'm kicking the can down the road, and I'm teaching psychologists and physicians and people in sexual medicine and psychology how we need to factor in these core emotions for research and clinical practice. So these affective behavior therapies, affective balance therapies, where we can teach clinicians and patients how to pay attention to the core emotions, is going to be very important in the treatment of not just sexual issues, but mental health issues. So again, our higher level minds are not effective often at turning around old experiences. What is trauma? Old experiences that get encoded in the mid-level mind under the hood that impact us going forward. That's going to be my next book, Why It's Never Too Late to Have a Happy Childhood, Reworking Childhood Trauma, so that we can make decisions. Most of us do pretty well, even if we have rough childhoods, but we can have more fun. That's why I said I want to doubt myself less. I want to be able to enjoy a lot more of my life. It's been my path. So often, no.
Hello.
Yes. Someone talking to me?
Yes.
Yes. Question?
I think he might have spoken accidentally, Dr. Nan.
Oh, okay.
But just giving you a heads up, it's 8:28, so you got a few more minutes before we get to the Q&A.
I'm going to go through this quickly, really quickly. So we're going to do a crash course. These 7 systems are wired in, we know, because Dr. Panksepp stimulated them in animals, and animals would let him know they liked the stimulation that felt good. They work to turn off that stimulation. So we're going to talk now about the seeking system powered by dopamine. Works with all our systems. So it gives us exuberance, exploration, and lust for life. Okay. So that is the learning signal. We call that the slutty neurotransmitter because it gets released with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We used to think of it as a reward circuit. Now we know it's a learning signal. That's why pleasure is a learning signal. I'll pass over this. It's not so important. I'll go through. This is the source of learning and habituation. So that's why you're really crazy about a new partner when you first get together, and after a while you level out. So when it's underactive, you see people depressed. And I can share this PowerPoint with the group if you'd like to look at it with, in more time. This contributes to depression. If it's overactive, you got people relentlessly searching compulsively without being able to experience pleasure. When it's imbalanced, you feel comfortable, engaged in your pursuits. You're flexible, you feel good. And when you can engage the seeking system with the care system and the play system, which I'll unpack really quickly, this system gets hijacked by a high stimulation lifestyle, which pretty much everybody is. I'm going to skip this slide because you can look at it at your own. We're going to talk about the defensive systems. They're primarily about survival. We all are born with the fear, the ability to feel fear. When they stimulated the circuitry, the animals look terrified. If you accidentally stimulate those circuits when you're doing brain surgery in humans for epilepsy, they are scared. Okay. So fear conditioning, if you think about PTSD, that is fear conditioning. If you think about kids who have test anxiety, that is fear conditioning. So I'll skip over this because
Dr. Nan, please, we'll just cut the Q&A shorter, so don't feel so rushed. You can take a few more minutes. Don't worry.
Okay.
We're loving it.
Well,
We're loving
all right. Thank you for that fear. I'll just pick up right where I am. Thank you. Because a lot of this is just deeper thing. When your fear system is overactive, you're going to be very hyperreactive to threats. And you can get generalized anxiety disorder. It will deplete the seeking system. So think about all of these systems are at effect of each other. So if you look at this country, people are very scared. And that's why we're having this division. If it's underreactive, you can't learn from negative feedback. People who have damage to a certain region of the brain, the amygdala, they don't learn from pain. They don't learn from negative feedback. So they can deny dangers and they're not well equipped for life. When it's in balance, you feel fear only when it makes sense and only to the extent that it's warranted, if that makes sense. Like having a little bit of fear. Somebody was talking about, wandering. I think it was Anastasia, wandering freely all through their childhood. It makes sense to have a little bit of fear. Walking alone in the dark at night, it's appropriately scary, in particular if you're in certain places. Upcoming work presentation, lesser but motivating fears. Normal fear heightens the arousal system just enough to warn and mobilize us. So let's talk about the rage system. So the defenses are fear, rage, and we're going to talk about panic, grief, sadness in a minute. The rage system is the wired-in substrate, which is the basis for feeling angry. Angry can get infused by all higher level interpretations, but at the basement of the brain, we have fear. The rage system gets turned on automatically when an animal or person is pinned down, physically threatened, or their actions are restricted. So you don't need to learn to get angry in those situations. If you block a person's ability or a kid's ability to explore, they get pretty angry. I have 7 grandchildren now, I have to count. They get pretty mad, the older ones, if you get in the way of what they want to do in exploration. It can also be triggered by being hungry, thirsty, hangry, or frustrated. So that system is a reaction to being cornered, threatened, or constrained from getting access to important resources. So outraged is when people feel mad at unfairness, inequality, or mistreatment of human beings. All emotions have information that can, if we pay attention to it, can really be very helpful for us. Harnessed rage is a powerful deterrent or motivator. However, it can get out of control and be disruptive. You see a lot of people hot-tempered these days, road rage, angry, being mean to each other on social media. So anger is way more nuanced. When we say anger, we're really talking about the cognitively infused with thoughts and beliefs and learning. So, for example, when people say they feel disrespected, there's some sort of like thoughts and beliefs about how they should be treated. So, our experiences contribute to how and the kind of circumstances that will contribute to anger. So, thoughts, opinions, interpretations, judgments, and beliefs. So, when in balance, the rage system is associated with being able to set boundaries and to defend against threats. And you learn how to take appropriate stands. You learn how to constructively facilitate resolution of conflicts. When overactive, people have hair-triggered temper, and that can be linked to coronary heart disease when people are hostile. When underactive, and you see this in people, they're like doormats sometimes. They don't take stands with partners. They don't take stands. They don't learn how to speak up for themselves. So when people get caught in like a victim mentality or learned helplessness, they're not getting the proper information from the rage system. So now we're going to talk about panic, grief, sadness. Panic, grief, sadness circuitry is what I like to say is the dark side of attachment. When you lose people like grief, you feel it in your body. That's because the panic grief system. It's contributing to life-sustaining social bonds by keeping us close to significant relationships, resources critical for our survival and thrival. It gets triggered in grief. It gets triggered when we have heartbreak. It's the neural substrate. You feel it in your body. That's panic, grief, sadness. It works alongside the care system, which I'll unpack in a minute, designed to ensure that we seek and we have companionship care community, which you guys are doing very well in your book club. That's all about the care system. Early childhood experiences fundamentally shape the basic tonality of the panic grief system to the point that that will contribute, if people have bad experiences and vulnerabilities, to psychiatric problems down the line, attachment issues down the line. If you have a genetic predisposition plus bad childhood experiences, you're going to end up having some problems. So the quality of our earliest social bonds with our caretakers basically dictates how secure we feel in the world with our needs being okay. And that can either, if you have a little bit of anxious wiring, that'll dial it down. If you're not anxious to begin with, it'll dial it up. So early childhood care is key for panic grief. When in balance, it enables us to appropriately experience and tolerate the full range of feelings, including negative ones. So people have addiction issues, sometimes have a hard time with negative affects. They have to turn the channel on their pain. So it also downregulates their ability to feel pleasure. So feeling tolerating emotions is the sign of a well-adjusted person. When you can tolerate your feelings and partner's feelings and kids' feelings, that's a very good sign. When it's overactive, you can have an anxious attachment style and difficulty separating from people. You can also end up with a panic attack disorder. If it's overactive panic grief, you can have a lot. It can be a sign of trauma. When underdeveloped, people might be avoidant of attachment. They don't, or dismissive. Those attachment styles are very much formed by early childhood experiences in conjunction with our predispositions. So I'm going to talk to you about care, play, and lust right now, and that'll be pretty much it. Care is love. Roxy Music used to say, love is the drug and I need to score. The care system runs on our internal opioids, our brain's own produced painkillers. So that's hardwired, that plus oxytocin. So we attach to our young and eventually our parents, our friends, our partners. That is the system of feeling good, feeling good. Chemicals give us the satisfaction of well-being. People who have that capacity feel pleasure. If that system is messed up, they're not going to be able to feel pleasure through ordinary, everyday kind of activities. The care system is the physiology of motherhood. It's the physiology of love. When we're seeking, people are seeking all sorts of things. You see them, they're on the internet, they're looking. What we're craving, the seeking system is about craving. It's not satisfying. What we really need is the satisfaction of the kind of connections that evolution has wired us for: social contact, connection, and love. And that really needs to be a lot more face to face and flesh to flesh than most young people are experiencing, which is why they're having so many problems. So when in balance, you feel insecure in your relationships, you have reliable sources of support. You join this kind of book group, you're social, you're able to love people without trying to control them. So you have secure love, you're in touch with your self-love, you practice self-care, you have good boundaries. Boundaries are good self-love. You can give without giving yourself away. You don't have to do so much people pleasing, which is someone mentioned before. When it's overactive, you might have difficulty seeking enjoyment, fun, and sex. Because you're so concerned about taking care of others, you're not really taking care of yourself. So it's a nice balance. Underactive, you're not making social bonds. So, you can see that an underactive care system will affect our ability to connect with people, and it will also undermine access to our lust system. Lust is another system. So we're going to talk about play. Play is a wired-in system. It's the joyful occupation of all young mammals. It's how we explore, experiment, learn about the world, socialize, rehearse skills that we need: competition, cooperation, from hunting to foraging to courtship and mating. Play is how we learn to get along with others. So one of the big problems that we're having these days is that kids are prevented from engaging in rat play. So rat play is rough and tumble play. So kids actually being able to play freely, to kind of do like puppy piles and to actually interact, deprives them of the activities that shape and develop the finely tuned social brain, so necessary for the balanced care panic continuum. People are very worried about kids touching each other. Children deprived of sufficient opportunities for physical play are at risk for developing hyperactive urges, distractibility, and restlessness that gets misdiagnosed as ADHD. It's overdiagnosed. Expecting kids to sit in school and be still all the time is not working for a lot of kids. And this lack of the cultivation of that learning may also be why our young people, the 20-somethings in particular, are having a hard time adapting to relationships. So when play is in balance, you have a good sense of humor, you know how to relax, you have hobbies, interests. If you're overactive, you might end up being one of those people who's always chasing play, like the Peter Pan, not committing to a partner, not settling down into a job. Put high play and high seeking, people might have trouble settling down and focusing. And, for people like me, who, because of my level of stress, that will downregulate play, it makes it hard to relax and have fun. So if you were unable to play as a child, you might end up with being very awkward and have trouble managing your stress. You might end up being very self-conscious and controlling. The last system, lust, is a circuit that's wired in. It's the urge to merge. It's a kind of social glue. It bonds important affiliation with people and places. It's more than just sex. It's the ability to connect, give us good experiences and connection with self and others. In order for people to, for lab animals, even lab animals need to have social skills in order to be able to mate. So we really need to, we have this motivation that can develop social skills across species. And it's really good when it's in balance. You can experience desire for sex and satisfaction when you have it. You feel comfortable with your desire level, even if it's not a lot of desire. When you are open to exploring ways to experience pleasure, I say lust for life outside of the bedroom is important. When overactive, you can show, as I talked about yesterday in a podcast, out of control, inappropriate, harmful sexual behaviors, over involvement with pornography, masturbation. When people are not able to regulate their emotions, they use sex in a way as a drug. When underactive, some people just have no interest in sex, and that's only a problem if it's a problem for the person. So when the seeking, rage, fear, panic, grief, care and play systems are out of balance, that can impact lust. When any emotional system is out of balance, it can affect lust and the other systems. And now, last but not least, I'm going to show you, these are results from my clients from something called, sorry, I got to go back one, the Affective Neuroscience Personality Scale. It doesn't measure lust, because if you ask people about sexual questions, you're going to get all sorts of reactions, probably on the other things. But here you see somebody, their seeking system is just average, but look at the anger system. Look at the fear system. And you can see that their care system is okay. And this, look at this person, high seeking, very low anger, a little bit extra fear, a little bit extra sadness. So the last slide I have here is talking about how I work with people. I have them understand what's out of balance in the core of their basement. Then I have them reset their nervous systems. So it's a longer conversation, but one thing you can learn to better balance your nervous system so that you can relax and help those core emotions go into better balance is how to engage the calming, restorative part of the nervous system by taking a long, smooth inhale and then making your exhalation just a little bit longer than your inhale. And what that tells your body is that you are safe, and then it kicks it into what's called the parasympathetic tone, which is the opposite of flight or fight. Most people now are living in perpetual activation of what's called the sympathetic nervous system, which is why we're ending up with cardiovascular problems, high blood pressure, anxiety disorders, aging, all of these stress, even cancer is contributed, if inflammation contributes, and anything that takes your body into out of balance contributes to that. So what we can do is we've got to work with the body first. That's why affective balance therapies are important. Get them into a restored, actually balanced space, and then teach them how to create new focus from the problem frame, which is what is wrong. I use my relationship as a problem. I have anxiety, into the outcome frame, which is what would I like to create? How can I get resourceful and resilient? who can help me access resources externally? So, for example, if you looked at those people, how they were out of balance, if they started working on creating a feeling of safety in their bodies, that downregulates fear. If you can step into focusing on feeling calm, that downregulates rage. And if you can focus on that, you have all of the resources internally to create everybody and everything already that you need, you can start feeling more secure. So my own recipe or blueprint for Nan is I'm a calm, confident, courageous, playful, joyful leader. I help people focus on the wins 30, 60, 90 days by focusing on the wins that create new attention, new ways to new habits. We see challenges as opportunities to commit to new ways of being. So, and then we can go from breakdown to breakthrough. And I coach people all through that time at looking at their challenges as opportunities. So now we're on to questions if we have any time.
Well, yeah, I just feel like I've had I'm taking a PhD course. I feel considerably, I feel very, very lucky because I had wonderful parents and a great relationship with my brother. And I know that was a good foundation for having a happy life. So let me pass it over to Carl to take any questions. I know there were lots of chatting. We do have requests for your PowerPoint. If you send it to Anastasia, I will make sure anyone who wants it.
And anybody who wants to sign up through my website for a free consult, I can talk about, answer questions, do whatever you'd like to dive a little deeper into this.
Certainly. And
all right, we have a few hands up. Anastasia, we can start with you.
Thank you. So first off, Dr. Nan, this was fantastic, as I expected it would be. I primarily just want to let everyone know that I have dropped your information in, and I'll drop it in again to the chat. So please definitely get her book. Her book is awesome. I found it to be incredibly beneficial. And do her a solid, please. If you get the book, please do a review on Apple. I mean, not Apple. I'm so used to speaking podcasts. Amazon reviews are very helpful for an author to be discovered. Her website also, plethora of content for you there. Do follow up with her. She is so approachable in everything, and I know that she would love to hear from anyone who wants to go a little bit further with her. So I'll drop that information again. And again, thank you, Dr. Dan, and we'll pass it off to more questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, please do keep questions brief, as we are almost out of time. Bill, go ahead.
Good morning, Dr. Wise. Thanks very much for your time this morning. A very interesting presentation. I'm in the process of putting together a what I call a wilderness workshop experience for first responders and wounded veterans and folks like that with veteran problems. And I have a small team, and one of them is a retired fireman who introduced me on our last field trip. We had 3 of them in 2023. Out in the backcountry, and he introduced me to a system of deep breathing promoted by a scientist by the name of I think his name is Wim Hof. It's deep.
I think I've heard of his stuff. Yes.
And so I've been trying it since, and I swear that I've seen marginal improvements in those 3 levels. Well, actually, the 2 top levels, physical and I think mental. I just wondered if you had heard of them and what you think of them.
I think it's wonderful. And one of the things that I impart to clients is that you don't even have to get into the quite as fancy stuff as he does. That even just simply extending your exhalation longer than your in-breath and making a habit of noticing when you're not breathing fully, like when you letting your body tension or your mind tension become the cue of dropping into putting attention on the long, smooth inhale, if possible, through your nostrils, and the longer, smooth exhalation. That just that very simple process over a bunch of days even can start making a big difference. What you're teaching yourself to use your cue of tension to create a new habit of dropping into that parasympathetic space. So, I think people think, oh, you got to do these more involved things. And they're wonderful if you have the time, attention, and energy. But really the basic breath, just this, I do teach more involved things that I've learned from yoga, working with energy locks. But the basic breath seems to do a real good job at modifying the arousal of the nervous system as a habit.
Thank you very much. Good presentation.
Okay, Janelle. Oh, I caught you by surprise, didn't I? Sorry.
It's so hard for me to get my pointer over to the unmute. Nan, thank you for that wonderful presentation. When the stakes are so high, how do we find more pleasure in our current political system?
Oy vey is me, as we say in Yiddish. What we need to do is really tap into what I am an Ericksonian hypnotherapist. And what that means is I'm trained in a kind of hypnotherapy you don't even have to go into trance to do. What I do is I tap into a sense of safety in the moment. In the moment, you are safe. Even if you have looming worries about the future, tap into feeling safe in the moment and remind yourself that you have all of the inner resources to create everything and everybody that you need, going forward. And think about, I like to think that in spite of all of the craziness going on, that generally people are good. And it's true, most people are good people. And that, think about the collective. How can we be kind and nice and calm so we contribute to a collective where we hold the space for us to learn together?
Thank you.
I understand that very well.
Yep.
It's on
Do
my
we have
mind
more
too.
questions? Do we have more questions? Anybody? Raise your hand. Yes, Susan. Yes.
Thank you. And should we translate oy vey? If you don't know what that means, it means I cannot believe this happened. But I want to thank you for that. I took copious notes. The deep breathing, thank you for mentioning that. That's been very helpful for me. But I also, to just change the subject, but I also want to say that our speaker for May 1st, Dr. Robert Wolf, is in the house, which I didn't notice before. We're going to get to hear from him. But I think that what you've laid out for us, I do feel like my brain is bursting with PhD work. I don't know if I understand it all, but thank you so much. This was illuminating.
Let me say something. Actually, Why Good Sex Matters is not really about sex. It's looking at our relationship with sex and underneath that pleasure as a tutorial for how the brain-mind works. So it unpacks these issues with just the lens of sex, is looking at our relationship with pleasure. So that's why my next book is not going to be about sex. It's going to be helping people be able to figure out. It's actually it would be a book before the sex book, how to be able to work with your core emotions. So you're making different decisions as if you had a really happy childhood, a different kind of recipe for yourself and your world.
Ooh, that's the good title for your book.
And for those who feel this was very dense material, just remember the recording will be on YouTube shortly.
Right.
Go and watch that again. I'm going to. So I definitely recommend that. Janice.
So I understand CBT. I wrote a book called Banish Burnout Toolkit, which is based on CBT, as well as going back and to understand the trauma from childhood. And when I say trauma, I mean ongoing trauma. But my question to you today is, if there are other people in your family or close friendships who you can see are suffering, like always feeling a victim and lonely,
Oh, yeah.
What can you do to help other people? Because you can't change
That's
other
a good
people.
question.
That's a great question. What you can do, there was something really nice in the New York Times. It said, if you see somebody struggling, you just ask them, what do you need? Do you need a hug? Do you need me to listen? How can I hold space for you? What I talk a lot about in my book is tolerating emotions And I think that if we, what makes it easier for me as a therapist, a grandmother, a mother, I was with my daughter when she was in labor, is being able to recognize that if I can make space to breathe and calm my own nervous system, that becomes in a way a little bit contagious.
One hopes.
One hopes, and tolerating people's feelings. When people can feel their feelings more fully, even if it's rage, horrible grief, it peaks and then it releases a layer of it. And when that happens, I think one of the big issues in our culture is we don't tolerate emotions all that well, including pleasure, including grief, that the actual feeling, I'm working with a lot of people now who have had addiction issues, who are now not using their substances and letting them just hold a space for riding the big waves of the feeling. It's transformational. If you can feel more of your pain, and let yourself feel it, it releases, you can feel more of your joy.
Some people are addicted to the pain, sadly.
Oh, I know. My mom was just like that. My mom was a borderline personality disorder, and it was not pretty. And so my siblings and I all are living with the aftermath. Her pain was her pleasure. She had pleasure from her pain. Not very good.
Mine too.
Okay, Patricia?
Thank you for an action-packed, really stimulating presentation. Susan Rowan, Jim Prost, and a couple of other friends are going to have a very wonderful, joyful day full of going to an exhibit, and then some of us are going to Carol Kelby's this evening for a soiree. If any of our local members wants to join us, we have room for a couple more people. Just let Craig know, or really directly as well to Carol. And I want to thank my friends who saw the notice about this on LinkedIn and reached out to say could they pop in. Every week we have different interesting speakers, different subjects, human interest. We invite you to come back next week. And yes, Richard Wolf, who is reached out to me, Mr. Wolf, yes, Dr. Wolf, reached out to me and congratulated me for being president. And I clicked on and saw what an interesting person he was, and not even knowing him, I said, hey, would you speak to us? And Susan has already booked him for the 1st of May. I think Linda Sage, you might be hearing from my pal Rowan about your work with the bad guys. We like to hear all sides. And as your relatively new president, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your attention and your enthusiasm. We welcome you to come back if you like us. Like a huge amount of speakers on this call were speakers for our group and liked us enough to stay around and become members. We had an announcement about Les Anderson and his celebration of his contribution to the Boys and Girls Club. Now, he is 90 years old now, our oldest long-time member. And as I said in my article and my president's message, we are a group of lifelong learners and fascinated in different subjects we didn't even know there were authors and experts to talk about. So thank you very much indeed. We will officially turn off the recording. If people want to hang around for a few more minutes, that will be fine. And we would love to see you next week to hear a story of redemption from one of our local newscasting heroes. So with that, thank you very much. We appreciate your attendance.